All right, good morning. Thank you for bearing with me Friday. The gentleman that came in and spoke, I was hoping he'd talk more about the way they use technology instead of like threatening. We're not talking about killing people, but anyway, still interesting, right? I wanted you to see, that technology changes everything, including, the military and the way that, people fight one another, which is kind of core to, humanity. We've been fighting each other since we've existed. So it was a kind of a neat example of that. What we're going to do today is today is all material day. No in-class projects, no presentations. We're going to get through a lot of things in chapter 4. And if you remember, when we were in chapter 4, we're talking about hardware and software. And remember the 5-component framework. We start with hardware, software, data, procedures, and people. And hardware and software is the computer side of things, right? So a lot of this we already went through. We talked about, like processing software, like the CPU and quad cores and dual cores, and that's the brain and what RAM is, the memory of computers. We talked about storage, and we learned a lot about zeros and ones, binary. To digitize something means to store it as ones and zeros. And anything, movies are digitized, audio files are digitized, your Word document is digitized. Everything dealing with the computer is stored as a series of ones and zeros. Ones and zeros are so simple, but if we put them together in a certain way, we can create these very complex structures that represent about anything, right? So that's what we talked about, and we said, this is important to know. As a business professional, you should understand these prefixes, not because we're here teaching Latin, but because if you're wrong by a power of 1,000. That's not a good way to be wrong, right? That looks silly to be wrong by a power of 1,000. So please understand what these are. We also said that, when we see a big B, that represents a byte. We see a little b, that represents a bit, right? A bit is a 1 or a 0. A byte is 8 bits, okay? So we talked about the speed, which hertz is a cycle. We didn't talk so much about this, but let's talk about this because I kind of glossed over this. We talk about software, okay? There are two main categories or camps we can put software into. And the first one is operating system software, and the second is application system software. So what is operating system software versus application? What is operating system? Give me one operating system that you know of. One operating system that you use. Yes?
Windows.
Okay, Windows is the dominant, personal desktop operating system. Yes, Windows 8, Windows 7, Windows 95, Windows 98. Those are operating systems. How about other operating systems? So that is a PC or desktop operating system. What else? iOS. So mobile platform, right? These became, very popular when we started having the smartphones take over. So iOS, that's Apple's mobile operating system. What else? What else? Who competes directly with iOS? Go ahead. Android, okay. Android very much is an iOS. What else? Who else is in that market, which is pretty much down to nothing? Android and iOS dominate that market now, but at one point, it wasn't those two. Who was kind of like for productivity and work? Yes? BlackBerry, okay, that was the one. Now, when Apple introduced their Apple Watch, what did they also come out with that's going to work with the Apple Watch?
Apple Pay.
What's that?
Apple Pay.
Apple Pay, right, you're right, that's a payment thing. But they also came out with watchOS, okay, which is the operating system that the watch will run, because think about it, it needs a separate operating system because it's so small, and they have these little icons that you can expand, and it's going to use the bezel for different inputs, right? And that's why operating systems are different based on the platform they use. You think about, mobile applications are different. Now, what Windows tries to do, what Windows 8 tries to do, is they try to bring together the desktop and the mobile platform into one, where it's very touchscreen oriented, okay? But operating system software, whether it's PC, whether it's mobile, whether it's watch, is geared toward controlling the hardware of the device. Controlling the hardware of the smartphone, controlling the hardware of the PC. And the other operating system we haven't talked about is server operating systems. So maybe we first should define what a server is. What's a server? What's a server? I think maybe we talked about this a little bit. What's a server? In computer terms, what's a server? Give me a server you know about. Have heard. Use it in context in a sentence. What's a server? What do you think? Do we have servers at St. Francis University? Yes, what kind of servers? Give me one type of server you think you'd expect to see at St. Francis University. Not the servers at work. What kind of servers? Okay. In SCOTUS Hall, we're in SCOTUS Hall, floor above us, there's a room, okay, probably about this size, and it's called the server room, okay? And I probably should maybe get a tour of it for you guys. But what a server is a high-end, specialized computer that does one thing, okay? That does one purpose. We have web servers, okay? What do you think web servers do? What do you think web servers do? We have a web server at St. Francis University. What do you think that web server does? Hence the name web server. What do you think it helps? It does. Yeah, it helps us provide internet. So we make a request through the web server for please retrieve this page, and the web server has connected to our internet connection and goes out. It's called a proxy server. We use a proxy server at St. Francis, but on your behalf it goes out and retrieves that information and brings it down to your desktop. We have storage servers. What do you think a storage server is? What do you think a storage server is? When do you use the storage server at St. Francis? What drives do you share to?
P drive.
You have a P drive? You guys save things in a P drive? Faculty members do. Where do you guys save things? iDrive? You guys call it the iDrive?
P drive.
You have a P drive? Okay. So all those shared drives, that means it's not stored on your computer. It's stored on the storage server that's up there in SCOTUS. So when you save something, you're saving it on there. Why is it better for you to save it on that storage server up in SCOTUS than on your machine? Yes, Matt?
Because if, say, something happens to your machine or you lose your files, it's a backup.
Okay, someone steals your laptop, gone. There's a fire, water, gone, right? Hopefully, when we store it on a server, we're hoping that that thing is professionally managed. And when I say professionally managed, it's in a secure location, right? Has uninterrupted power supply. That's a hallmark of servers. Has usually it's air conditioned well, so the servers don't overheat. The other thing is it should have regular backups, and not just regular backups, but when they do off-site backups. So say SCOTUS Hall burns to the ground, well hopefully we've been doing backups and taking those backups off-site, and I think they take them and they put them in Schwab Hall somewhere. So if SCOTUS burns down, we can go over to Schwab, get those backups and restore and be up and running, okay? What a server is a specialized machine, okay? A specialized machine that does there's print servers, there's storage servers, there's database servers, there's web servers, that does like one function. Like it's a high-end machine that does one function on the behalf of what we call clients, okay? So a lot of times we call these client server applications because there's email servers, okay? So a client server application would be, you guys, do you use webmail or do you use the GroupWise client on your machines? When I say do you use GroupWise web, do you type in an address or do you have a piece of software you run on your machine?
Software.
Okay, that's called the client. That piece of software that you run is called the client, and it goes out and checks our email server and says, hey, are there any new emails for Brandon Mack? Are there any new emails and he wants to send an email, so attach that. So there's a client piece and a server piece. You know what I mean? That the software that's installed on your desktop is the client piece, and it goes out and speaks to the server piece that fulfills your request. Why are a lot of applications client-server based? Let's stop there for now. Okay, that's good. That's what a server is. Any server operating systems you're familiar with? Any server operating systems you're familiar with? Ashley, give me one. No? None? Ian, give me a server operating system. Have you ever heard of Unix? Have you ever heard of Linux? These are open source. They're pretty dominant in the server world. Microsoft has a, and I'm at a loss to think of it right now, but Microsoft server is called, I can't remember what it is, but they have a server operating system. So these are a different class. These are operating systems for these servers, for these high-end machines that fulfill these results. All right, so we know what operating systems are. They control the hardware, right? They're the things like, if you think about your operating system is the things controlling like your breathing, your blood flow. That's the things that keep you alive, right? That you feel things, your nervous system, that's the operating system. How about application software? What is application software then? What is application software? Application software is software designed for a certain application, for a certain use, for a certain particular use. Give me one example of application software. And you guys know this because you have, right, we talk about apps on your phone. Apps are an application that do something. They play Flappy Bird. Whatever, that's an application, right? It does something, okay? But give me some applications that we talk about in the business world. What's an application that everyone in the business world uses? Yes?
Excel.
Okay, that's an application. It's a spreadsheet application, right? It's a program, software, that allows you to do what? Calculations and graphs and all those good things. Word, PowerPoint, or applications. Anything you install on top of your operating system that does something, like an app, is an application piece of software. In the business world, we can further break that down, and these are some operating systems, non-mobile clients, Windows, Mac OS, Unix, Linux, I talked about that. Servers, Windows Server, I guess it's just called Windows Server. Unix and Linux are the two operating systems we see there. These are some of the Symbian, which is, I think it's used more in worldwide than it is in North America, but it's Nokia, Samsung, and other, that's a mobile operating system. Anyways, let's talk about these types of application software. The first one is called horizontal software. And when we talk about horizontal software, and this is a good business term. Horizontal application means it goes across all kinds of industries and industry segments. This type of software is used in education, in healthcare, in manufacturing, in, it would be any kind of service industry. It's software that can be used across multiple industries, okay? Give me an example of horizontal software. Give me an example of horizontal software. Software that can be used across multiple industries. We gave some. Go ahead.
PowerPoint.
Sure. PowerPoint, I used PowerPoint when I worked in the financial industry. I used PowerPoint when I worked in the education industry, right? What else? What else is horizontal software? Something that can be used across multiple industries. Give me some other things. What else? Email is application software that's horizontal because it goes across many industries. What else? What else? Excel goes across many industries. Anything that can be applied to multiple industries is called horizontal software. Versus vertical. Vertical is software that is geared toward one industry. Okay, one industry. It doesn't make sense to use it across healthcare, education, manufacturing, the financial services industry. It only makes sense in this one industry. Give me an example of vertical software. Vertical application software. Pablo?
Tenemos.
What is it?
It's a banking software.
Okay, so it's geared toward the financial service industry, right? It's geared toward keeping track of accounts. We have no use for that at St. Francis University, right? We don't have bank accounts here. You don't get loans from St. Francis University, per se. You don't have a St. Francis University checking account. So they have software that's geared for their purpose. What else? Give me something else. Yes?
Could Gretel be one?
Gretel?
Yeah.
Gretel is what, like a statistical software?
Yeah.
I would probably say that's horizontal. The reason for that is, it can be used for someone doing, marketing research, it can be used for statisticians, it can be used in the sports industry. I'd say it kind of falls along more so, it's specialized, it's statistical software, but I could say it can be used across any of those industries, right? Okay, it could be. How about, what software am I using, and actually most of your professors are using here at St. Francis University, that is geared toward education industry?
Doodle.
What's that? Blackboard, sure. Blackboard is a good example of vertical software, right? People in the banking industry have no use for it, right? The people in healthcare have no use for it, but in education they said, hey, we're going to dominate this market, right? We're going to provide something that people in the education world want. Franklin, you have a question?
Could Doodle be seen as horizontal?
I would say Doodle would be seen as horizontal because, think about it, I schedule meetings when I'm a professor. If I worked in banking, I'd schedule meetings. If I was a doctor, I'd schedule meetings. I would use Doodle. So it can be used across the platform, right? Across many industries. And a lot of that stuff, okay, we talked about like Office, like PowerPoint, Excel, Doodle. A lot of that stuff that's horizontal, in a lot of cases, we call that personal productivity software, right? It doesn't matter, you know, what industry I'm working in. I want to be productive. I want to get stuff done, right? I want to get things done. I want to draft documents. I want to make presentations. I want to do calculations. That's called personal productivity software. It's also called office automation systems, but I think personal productivity software is the more dominant term now. Personal stuff to get things done, right? You know, Doodle to get things done. Project management software would be an example of personal productivity software. So vertical, geared toward a certain industry. Your doctor probably has some kind of medical software, right? To keep track of, you know, your dental appointments and when your next appointment is and what your teeth look like and where you have fillings. I don't need that kind of software in education. They definitely need that for dentistry, right? They need that for the medical health, you know, for billing purposes. So it's geared toward an industry. The last one is something so unique. Okay, it's called one-of-a-kind software. One-of-a-kind software is that this organization, this one organization, has a unique need, so unique to them that they have the only real version of this software in the world. You know, the example your book uses, which is probably a good example, is the IRS has to process submitted claims, what do you call it, tax returns, okay? They have to process submitted tax returns. No other institution has to process federal tax returns except the IRS, right? I don't have to do it at St. Francis University, Cigna doesn't have to do it, M&T Bank doesn't have to do it. So only the federal government has that. So they have to have their own unique software, right? It's unique to them. Does that make sense? Okay, so those are the three types of software. Now, we kind of talked a little bit about client-server, and there's a term in your book that I like you to understand, something called thick client versus thin client computing. Okay? Thick client versus thin client computing. So what is the client, first of all? We talked about what is the client. What is the client? Where is the client software? What is the client in the server-client relationship? What is the client?
What's on the computer?
Okay, your computer, right? You're the client, the software on your computer. So thick and thin says, if it is software, how much processing or how much of the application is dependent upon your computer, right? If it's thick, that means a lot of the processing, a lot of those kind of things happen on your computer, right? That you need to install software on your computer. That's a thick client application. We need this client to do some of the functions. Thin client, we say, you know what? All we have to do is attach to the server, and all that magic and all the new releases and all the software is up there, and we're just kind of looking into it. We're just looking into it and pulling down information. Give me an example of a thin client type of situation. Give me an example of a thin client type of situation. Give me an example of a thin client type of situation. And they're much more prevalent than they were. We just mentioned a vertical application that we use at St. Francis University that some of you may be using right now. Blackboard. Is Blackboard thick client or thin client? Would you say it's a thin client or a thick client? It's thin. Why? How much? Go ahead, Katie.
Well, I was just going to say it just surprises students.
It just applies to students.
Students, teachers.
And did you have to install anything on your machine to use Blackboard? What did you need on your machine to use Blackboard? Internet, a browser, right? That's the only piece of software, that unbelievably ubiquitous utility called a browser, right? All you need is internet. So all the processing that happens where? On the server side. So all you need is a web browser, right? That's a good example of a thin client type of application. When you use webmail, okay, webmail is thin client. All you need is a browser. Anytime we're talking about web applications, those are definitely thin client. And that is now more the norm than anything else. Doodle is thin client, right? Most software has gone to thin client over thick client. Now there still are some thick client things, like you still have Excel installed here. Why do you have Excel installed here? Well, because there's still some processing that happens, and that likes to utilize your resources. But there's also things like Google Spreadsheets, which you guys saw. Google Spreadsheets would be thin client or thick client. Google Sheets. It would be thin client, right? You're using the processing power of Google to add these columns. So I've just told you, most applications have moved to thin client, or are moving to thin client. Why? Why? Go ahead, Katie.
I have a question.
Yes.
So, are you saying that like a thin client is more of something that you don't need, like, on your computer, you have like a button, like for Excel, you click that and it opens up Excel, but then...
Because Excel is installed on your hard drive,
Yeah.
right? And when you click on that button, it loads it into your memory,
Yeah.
and now it's your version of Excel. That's thick client. Go ahead, keep going.
And then thin is just like being able to open up a browser?
Thin
Or
client,
you don't
right,
have to
okay,
open
so
it?
thin client is, where is this stuff installed? Well, if I use Google Sheets, which is a spreadsheet package, right? Did you install Google Sheets? No, you didn't. All you said was, Dr. Miko made me register for this. I go to this address. It's going to some web server somewhere, right? Some in Google land, I don't know, some server farm in the middle of the desert, I don't know, I don't care, right? And I'm using their processing power, okay? That's the difference between thick and thin, right? Something you have on your machine. So why do you think so much of the development has moved to thin client? And even the newest version of Office, well, it's a pay license. It's called Office 365. You heard of that? Okay, that's a cloud-based solution. They call it cloud-based a lot of times too. Why do you think many things have moved to that? What do you think makes it easier? What's better about it? What's worse about it? Come on, you guys can know what you know. Knowing what you know, you should be able to help answer this. Pablo?
You can just access it from wherever you want.
Okay, so one beautiful thing about thin client is it isn't my machine. So if I have a browser and an internet connection, I can access it from anywhere, right? I don't Google Docs if I'm in Spain, if I'm in Argentina, as long as I have an internet connection, right? Okay, that's one nice thing, right? Because it's stored centrally somewhere. I don't even care what's stored. A lot of times they say in the web it's stored in the cloud. Okay, they call it cloud computing, because what it's saying is it's on the internet somewhere, but we don't know where the hell it is. So we say something, cloud is fluffy. We don't know what the hell, where it is, when it is, but we just say it's in the cloud. So that's one thing, right? You can access it as long as you have a browser. You can access it. As long as you can access that server or the cloud, you can access it. What else is advantageous about that? What else is advantageous about the thin client model? Yes?
Storage,
Okay, so what do you mean by storage?
and doesn't take space of your hard drive.
Okay, very good. Now we know that storage is a lot cheaper than it used to be, and it's a lot easier to get big storage, but Google will give you, 8 gigabytes free. They said, what the hell? I have 100 gigabytes for $2 a month, right? So there's still some storage, but think about it, if it's a thin client, it's out here somewhere, and someone's professionally managing that storage, right? Someone's backing that up. Do I trust Google's engineers to back up and make sure everything's there, or myself? Well, I'll tell you what, that's an easy one. I trust Google's engineers, they're much better. Well, no, I'm not going to say it, but okay, keep going. What else? That's true. What else? What else? How about installing software? Okay, how about installing software? Back 10, 15 years, if we rolled out a new application at the bank, and it was desktop software, say there was 1,500 employees, we would have to install that software on 1,500 employees' desktops. Guess what that takes? Time and money. And guess what that causes? Issues. Now, if there's a new version of the software, and it's a thin client, Where do we have to update that software? Where do we have to update that software? 1,500 machines? 2,000 machines? No, where? One place. And next time you log in, hey, you're using a new version of the software, right? It's a beautiful thing. What else can we do? If we don't have to have a lot of storage space on here, if we don't have to have a lot of processing power, what can we do? What can we do then? If all we really need is a browser, what can we do then? What can that do with that machine? It hasn't really happened so much, but what we could do. If all the processing and all the storage are somewhere on the server, we don't need high-end machine, we don't need storage space, guess what? We don't need a high-end machine at all, right? So think about it. You ever hear what are Chromebooks? You know what Chromebooks, that's the whole premise of Chromebooks. You guys know what a Chromebook is? Google came out with Chromebooks, and they're still available. You can Google them and find Chromebooks. But what they're geared toward, they don't have a hard drive, right? They boot up in like 3 seconds because they say, you don't need to install anything on your computer. You're going to use this is a true thin client. All you're going to need is a web browser, and everything's going to be in the cloud, right? So we could, instead of buying $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 machines, we could buy $300 Chromebooks for everyone in our organization and say, we'll invest in the infrastructure, the central infrastructure, and everything will be web-based and thin client-based. Does that make sense? Now, it's kind of gone opposite when we like our phones, really, in a lot of cases, a lot of that processing is happening in the cloud, but we keep getting these more powerful phones because, we install applications on them like gaming applications that need a lot of speed, things like that. So those are going a little bit opposite of that. Not that they're thick client by any means, but they're getting more robust processing power every level. Every version is a little more robust. But truthfully, you can do a lot of things with a low-end thin client at this point. All right. So on those same lines, let's talk about something called virtualization. Okay, virtualization. Virtualization is fairly new. Okay, but it's becoming more and more prevalent in the business world. Virtualization is saying, I'm going to virtually, instead of having a machine, I'm going to virtually have a machine. Okay, and let me explain. There's 3 flavors of virtualization. The first one is called PC virtualization. So your laptop runs what operating system? What operating system does your laptop run? Windows 8, I think, right? You guys Windows 8? Some people Windows 8, some people not, right? Windows 7 and wait, okay. So that's the operating system. Now, have you ever heard of what's called a dual boot machine? Maybe you have a geeky friend in computer science who has a dual boot machine. Yes, no? Okay. Some people say, all right, I like Windows operating system, but I also need to use Linux operating system because there's what's called native applications that I'm working on that only run under Linux or ones that only run under Windows. So what PC virtualization is, we run basically on the same physical machine. We basically have 2 machines. One's Windows-based and one's Linux-based or some other operating system. It would be if your mobile phone had iOS and then you said, okay, turn it on again, but this time make it run Android. Okay? That is virtualization. So one machine looks like 2 machines. That's PC virtualization. There's less and less of that occurring. Okay? That used to be a big geek thing to have what they call a dual boot machine, which it could boot to Windows or it could boot to Linux, right? So it's one physical machine that has basically 2 PCs on it. Do you know what I'm saying? And it's like schizophrenic. You could be using the Windows version, then reboot and be using the Linux version, okay? That's PC virtualization. This, though, is used a lot. Server virtualization is when I'm talking about servers. I'm saying, we have a web server, or we have a storage server, or we have a database server, an email server, and you're thinking, okay, that's a machine, that's a machine, that's a machine, that's a machine. But instead of that, it being like, hey, the email server is that machine there. And sometimes it is. Sometimes this machine is dedicated to email. This machine is dedicated to web. But a lot of times what places do is they buy very high-end machines, and this one high-end machine is a server for email, it's a server for storage space, and it might be the web server as well. It's one machine, but it might be running 3 different operating systems and look like 3 different machines, 3 different unique machines. You know what I'm saying? Yes, no, is this clear or no? That's virtualization, like it's virtually pretending to be 3 machines and running 3 separate functions at once, but it's actually 1 machine. Now, this is the one that really is going to transform the workplace and has started to transform the workplace. It is called desktop virtualization. What desktop virtualization is, okay, if you don't have you all have your desktop a certain way, right? You have a picture of your boyfriend, you know, on the cover. You have your icons in a certain way, right? You have these are the programs that load to my start bar. You know, this is what my little the little memo pad I put on it, right? You have your own desktop. Now, if you go into the lab and you log in on another machine, you can still access a lot of resources, right? You can still use webmail to get your email. You can still use you know, any kind of cloud-based to do a lot of things, right? Google Docs, you can do those things. But people still want to use their desktop. They say, I want any machine to look just like my machine. So what desktop virtualization is on servers, okay, and a big player in this is someone called VMware. I don't know if you heard of VMware, maybe someone in computer science has. What we do is we have servers, and they host, it's called a hosting machine, it hosts your desktop. So that if I log on at the airport, okay, that machine looks just like my machine. It's running my operating system, whatever the hell it is, Windows 8, Windows 7. It's running it on this server somewhere, but it looks just like my desktop. Anything I installed on my desktop is now available on this desktop. The picture of my boyfriend is now on my desktop, right? The little memo pads are now on my desktop. So, what businesses are doing is they say, hey, instead of everyone having, you know, a machine that has, they might have a thin client machine, and we're going to host your desktop on a server, right? So anything you install to your machine actually gets installed in the server. Anywhere you log on, right, it looks just like your desktop. The applications you run, the application you install are there. It's called desktop virtualization. What do you think that helps with? What do you think that helps with in the business world? Have you ever been, you guys maybe travel with soccer, right? You're in a hotel, you don't have your computer and you use the lobby hotel and you're like, oh, right? You don't know where things are, it doesn't have the browser you're used to using, it doesn't have the applications. It's a pain in the butt, right? So if you use desktop virtualization, no matter where you go, it's your machine, right? It doesn't, because all that is hosted on a server somewhere, but it looks like your machine. Does that make sense? No, yes? So a physical server, we can have 100 desktops stored on here. So if Katie logs in, she sees her operating system, because what we're doing is like partitioning resources. We're saying we have this big machine that can do all this processing. This is Pablo's portion, this is Earl's portion, this is Ian's portion. And when they log in, this is what we want their screen to look like. When Earl logs in, this is the pictures we want to load. If he stores something, store it here. Does this make sense? This is becoming much more commonplace in business. And if you talk to your parents, you know, I imagine some of them use this kind of technology because it's gotten to the price where it's very cheap. Okay? That's called desktop virtualization. All right. So let's move a little bit further. Okay? And I want to talk about, and this is important for you as a business professional. A lot of times you're not going to be developing software, right? You're not going to be doing coding, and that's not what this course is about. You're not going to be hooking up servers, you're not going to be installing machines, but you are going to be tasked with, you're going to be in charge of a department. And your department's going to need software to run. You might be in charge of the marketing department, and you want to roll out a CRM system, a customer relationship management system, you know, to monitor your customers, right? So you need to understand some of these things. And one of the things we need to understand is we understand how we can acquire software. Okay, how we acquire software. First question. Do we own software? Do you own Microsoft Office? Do you own Microsoft Office, Plum? If you did, you would not be in my class. You'd be a billionaire, right? If you own Microsoft Office, you would be a billionaire. You'd be filthy rich, right? We don't own Microsoft Office. We don't own software typically. What do we do with software?
License it.
We license a version of it. We license the use of it. What you bought when you installed Microsoft Office is you're allowed to use the software. You're licensed to use a version of it, right? Go ahead.
In Bulgaria, nobody has the original one.
In Bulgaria, no
Nobody
one,
has the license.
you just pirate the hell out of everything? Yeah, that happens in a lot of fun. I didn't know Bulgaria was one of them. China, it's a big problem in China. China, any kind of movie that comes out and you're like, oh, I can't wait to see this movie. Well, they've seen it already. They pirate the hell out of things. I mean, that's, because they don't have very strict like copyright, patent infringement kind of things. So there's a lot of that happens, okay? In Bulgaria, you're telling me,
It's like the movie is 2-3 days after it's in the cinema, you can download
yeah. And then all software, you're telling me?
software and games.
How about in businesses? Is it pretty commonplace in businesses? Because that's the difference, like, college students will pirate, right? You guys, you're thinking, I'm broke and I'm a college student, who the hell cares? No one's gonna sue me, right, if I pirate this, right? But businesses in the United States pretty much say, well, I'm gonna run, I want money for my services, so they pretty much follow the rules, right? St. Francis University obviously follows the rules. We license everything we run. Even small businesses, medium-sized businesses, larger businesses do. But the difference is some of these international countries, even the businesses, even the high schools, they pirate software, right? Even, it's like commonplace. I don't know if Bulgaria is under
Games
that.
like this.
Yeah, so, imagine that if, St. Francis said, hey, we don't own the license to this, but we're gonna roll this out to all you students, right? That's commonplace in some of the international countries. But let's get back to licensing, okay? So we're licensing a version of software. And why is that the model that we use? What is the beautiful, beautiful, beautiful thing about software as composed to other things that we need? How much time, how much development money do you think was spent coming up with the current version of Microsoft Office? What do you think? I don't know, so you can't be wrong. What do you think? $5,000? Probably hundreds of millions of dollars if you think about all the development time and all the versions of Microsoft Office spent. So think about that. Something that took hundreds of millions of dollars to develop, right? To be perfect. You can license, you can use, just like anyone else, for a license fee of $100, $200. Think about that compared to the proprietary, the physical world. If General Motors spent $100 million to develop a vehicle, okay, and then they could license a version of it that you could all use, and when we use it, it's a physical device, so we'd have to get in it and things like that, it would be $100. It doesn't work that way, right? Why can software work that way versus physical products, versus a car? Cars are expensive, right? They're $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. Software, probably just as much time and money to develop, maybe $200. Why, Rodrigo?
Because you can make as many copies of it as you want.
Exactly. Because, back to binary, because I can replicate it basically for free, right? I can't replicate a Cadillac, right? I can't say, all right, we made this Cadillac the best damn Cadillac ever. Let's just make free copies of it and give everyone a copy for $200, right? We can't do that with physical products. With software, we can, right? With software, we can because it's digital. So it's a very nice thing to do. The cost of software, the actual physical cost of software is nothing, right? Storage space is free. Music, they don't say like, well, this song takes 4 megabytes, so it's going to be a little. No one cares about the storage space, right? The physical part, no one cares about because it's free. They care about the time and money developed it. So that's the beautiful thing about software is we can, for a very, very low price, use something that costs hundreds of millions of dollars to develop. Now let's talk about licensing. Okay, let's talk about licensing of software. There are different types of licensing, and there's one called a site or enterprise license. It is what St. Francis has for Microsoft Office. A site or enterprise license says, hey, anyone at our site or our enterprise, anyone associated with St. Francis University can use this software. Now that is usually priced on well, how many employees or how many students do you have? We know, we have roughly 2,500 altogether. So they give us like a bulk price, right? They say for X $1,000, your site can use this software. Anyone associated with St. Francis. So a lot of organizations go that way, right? If you're M&T Bank and you say, hey, we want to roll this out to everyone, we want to use this, okay, it's a site license. How many employees do you have? Here's the price for that many employees, okay? That's called a site or an enterprise license. There are also licenses called seat licenses. What do you think a seat license is? What do you think a seat license is? And this, as a business person, you should understand the difference between the two. What do you think a seat license is? Pablo?
For computer, you install it.
Okay, basically you can buy a seat license. You can say, okay, we're buying a 100 seat license or a 25 or a 12 seat license. And what that is as Pablo said, it can go one of two ways. It could say, if I buy a 25 seat license, I can install it on 25 computers or let 25 people use it if it's like web-based, right? I have 25 sign-ons to get. Does that make sense? That's all I can do. I kind of buy in bulk, right? But not so much that I say everyone needs this. So I buy a seat license. Now the other one, there's also something called concurrent seat licenses. And we don't say, like if it's web-based, we don't say these are the 25 people that can use the software. We say no more than 25 people at a time will use this software. It could be, today it could be us 25, and then tomorrow it could be Mr. Eklund's class of 25, right? That's called a concurrency license. At any given point in time, only this many people can be using this software. Now, how does licensing of software work in not on the desktop, but in industry? Typically, here's how it works. You pay a one-time fee. If it's something like Blackboard, okay, and a lot of times this has gone away, to help install it, for the first time. And then annually, you pay what's called an annual or maintenance fee. And what an annual or maintenance fee is they say, hey, if you want to continue to use this, it's going to be $25,000 this year. And what you get for that is they say, we will give you the latest version of the software free of charge. Any modifications we make to it, if you have a problem with it, you report it to us, we'll fix it, right? They're maintaining the software. They are fixing the software. We don't have to do that, right? We report the problem, they take care of it. So most software in organizations are geared that way. And sometimes that one-time fee is nothing. Some places just do an annual fee model, right? It's going to be $20,000 every year you use it. We'll give you the latest and greatest, okay? Banking software I know was a one-time fee and then an annual maintenance fee. But this is how they typically work, okay? This is how they typically work. So the beautiful thing about software is a license is a right to use specified number of copies, and it limits the vendor's liability. A site license flatly installs software on all company computers or all computers at a specific site. So, we have like only 4 minutes, so we're going to come back to open source. But I want to talk about what types of applications exist and how do organizations obtain them. So we already talked about horizontal, vertical, and one of a kind. And I already mentioned this. Because it is so easy to replicate, how is 99% of software acquired in the business world? Probably higher than 99%, probably 99.5%. We license it. And we buy what's called off the shelf. Meaning, we buy it, we install it, we use it. Okay? GroupWise is what we use for email. We said, what's your GroupWise? What's your software? We install it, we use it as is. Okay, that's called off the shelf. Off the shelf is like buying a suit off the rack, right? We just say, hey, I'm a 42 long, this is just buy it off the rack, right? That's the way most software is acquired. And then think about it, it applies to definitely anything that's horizontal. Why does it apply to anything that's horizontal? Well, think about a payroll system. We have to pay people, Google has to pay people, United Healthcare has to pay people, M&T Bank has to pay people. So why should we spend time and money developing our own payroll system when there's a payroll system out there that works great, right? It is like the status quo. We use email, all those places use email. Why should we build our own email system when email can work? We can install it across all those industries. So that's called off the shelf, okay? That's off the shelf. Now it's a good thing because it keeps the price down, but if you buy off the shelf software, it doesn't provide you any competitive advantage. Why? Maybe that's not important to us, but why doesn't it provide you competitive advantage if it's off the shelf software? If I can buy it, so can my competitors, right? Off the shelf software is great and it's the most commonly used thing, but it provides no competitive advantage. And a lot of those things are commodities, right? They're not core businesses. Now, vertical applications, usually off the shelf, but sometimes off the shelf with customizations. For example, we bought Genzabar. Okay, Genzabar is what's called our administrative software system at St. Francis. It keeps track of transcripts. It's how you guys register through MyFrancis, grades, all those things. It's called Genzabar, right? It's used by our institution, by other higher education institutions, but we may have some certain characteristics that are a little bit different at St. Francis. So we make some customizations to it. You know, it would be like me buying a suit, you know, use the suit example again, and saying, I'll buy this suit, but my inseam is a little bit different, so I want you to hem these pants. Or my waist is a little bigger, so I want you to let it out a little bit, right? That's what off the shelf with customizations are, right? So I buy it, and then I modify it for myself somewhat. And that applies to both horizontal, that off the shelf customization is done a lot of times with vertical applications. Now, if I have one-of-a-kind software, something so unique to me that I'm the only one that needs it, I'm left with developing that myself. That would be, to use the suit example, I'm beating behind this suit example, but what would custom develop be in the suit example? I go to the tailor and I say, I want one of those suits that they wear on like NFL draft day. You know what I'm saying? Those suits that are like those things fit those people like, they're muscular, but fits them like a glove. They're beautiful suits, right? You know those suits are like $2,000, yes? And they every contour of their body just perfect, right? That is custom developed. It is the most, think about it, of those three options, it is the most expensive, yes? Off the rack or off the shelf, the cheapest, but it provides no competitive advantage. Okay? All right, when we come back on Wednesday, we will talk about open source versus proprietary software when we talk about acquiring software. Have a great day.